And we're live with the SEO Career Mastery webinar. We have Ryan Jones on today, Marketing Manager at SEOTesting. How are you today, Ryan?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. It's just glad to get another solid week over with.
Yeah, I suppose everyone listening to this and myself are glad it's coming up to Friday and get a bit of time off work. And as you were saying before, you're helping a friend move house, so you've got a bit of work cut out over the weekend as well.
Yeah, different kind of work. This will be a lot more physical. So I'll skip my gym session tomorrow and just stay off my feet.
That's perfect, Ryan. Well, listen, we'll get into this just with the first question of how did you get into SEO and what's your background?
So I was pretty lucky, really, when I mean, my sort of backstory is I had no idea what I wanted to do when I left school. So I got to sort of 15, 16. You get to that sort of age and you have all these meetings with career counselors, and this as well. If you don't know what you want to do, then maybe you should go to university, and obviously that gives you more time to decide and everything. But I was always pretty convinced that uni wasn't the right path for me. So as a sort of stroke of blind luck, really, I had a sort of conversation with a career counsellor who mentioned apprenticeships, and sort of beyond that was obviously they were going through the positives, obviously paid to learn and everything like that, but then the negatives being you kind of stuck in that job role. There's no like there's no sort of switch that you can have, which I
Yeah.
disagree anyway, because I was always under the impression that I'm young enough, I can switch when I want and if needed. But so I kind of looking on these job boards and stumbled across a digital marketing apprenticeship with a local agency in Derby, and yeah, just applied, got the job, started like a week after my 16th birthday, so like
Okay.
jumped straight into work, and yeah, it's spiraled from there, really. So there's been sort of stints as an agency side digital marketer. There's been stints as like an apprentice web developer. I've been in-house at e-commerce companies, and now obviously I'm in-house at SEOTesting, which is a SaaS company. So this is like completely different altogether. So there's been a lot of various job roles I've had over well, I'm going into my 9th year in marketing now, so it makes me feel a bit old, but there we go.
And straight in at the age of 16. And was marketing something you always wanted to go down that path? Or was it just more of a in the moment thing? Oh, I'll try this out and then fell in love with it.
Pretty much, it was like I didn't really understand. Obviously, I kind of had that idea that everyone has around marketing of maybe you do TV advertisements or whatever, or like they're kind of like that sort of brand umbrella term for
Hmm.
marketing and that sort of stuff. But digital marketing, I had no idea what it entailed, but I always knew I was pretty good with computers, and I liked working on computers and being quite technical and spreadsheets and all stuff like that. My ICT was always the grade that I got the highest at school, so I thought, well, if it's got computers to do with it, then I can't really go wrong. So I'll jump into that, see what happens, and then obviously if I didn't enjoy it at the end of it, then I can just sort of move on.
Yeah, that's completely fair enough. And in the SEO side of things, so I know you've obviously got a lot of experience in SEO. How did you end up going down the SEO route away from like PPC and the standard marketing?
Yeah, so obviously I started with a digital marketing apprenticeship, which kind of
Hmm.
is like all encompassing. So there's a bit of SEO, there's a bit of PPC, there's even like a bit of graphic design. Even like even in those early days, it was like there's like lots of CRO stuff, but we were kind of given free reign to work on all these different topics, and then kind of towards the mid part of the apprenticeship, then we could choose to specialize and spend the sort of second half of the apprenticeship doing more of that. And
Hmm.
SEO was the one I always gravitated to initially, purely because it's kind of like that perfect balance of being creative whilst also being technical. So
Yeah.
obviously you can write blog posts, but then obviously once that's published, then there's a lot of like data analysis that you need to do. There's like, how can we get people moving through from this blog post to like clicking a call to action or something like that. So it's kind of like that 50-50 split that's always been interesting to me, and always like kind of why I stayed in SEO.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, yeah. So it sort of specialised in SEO and went down that route, and the rest is history at this stage. But I suppose
Yeah, yeah.
having the background with digital marketing, understand both sides of it, and then specialise in SEO, just creates overall a good foundation within that. And as you were saying, you didn't go to university, you fell into the apprenticeship and stuff. Do you believe, like, sort of today, not going down in university, right, would limit you in finding a role within SEO? Or what would your opinion be on that?
Yeah, I've kind of got an emphatic answer for that, and the emphatic answer is no. Purely, I mean, you can use the anecdotal sort of evidence that it hasn't affected me in sort of any stretch, really. Not going to university, as like we were talking before, I started straight away when I was 16, which means, I mean, I've just turned 24 not so long ago, but I'm like, even with that, I'm now just about to enter the start of my 9th year. So like I'm coming up on a decade sort of already, even with only being 24, and it means I've had a lot of I've had the opportunity to go into a job role, learn the ins and outs straight away. I've been given the opportunity to fail as well, which is a really important thing.
It
So we
is
can
indeed, yes.
these tests that fail, or we can write a piece of content that doesn't land, and then we can sort of extrapolate that and work out why that didn't work and everything. So I think having an acceptance around failure is a big part. But yeah, I don't think it limits you in any stretch. I think obviously if you have a job role in mind and you need a degree for that, like a sort of I mean, sort of a doctor or a vet is like the biggest example.
Yeah.
Like that's absolutely what you want to do, and you know you want to do that, then 100% go for that. But I'm always of the opinion, if you don't know what you want to do, why silo yourself with spending 3-4 years, whatever it is, getting a uni degree and spending all this money and all of that. So,
No, honestly, I couldn't agree more on the analogy of like doctorate. You know, if there's a certain path or career you want to go down, yes, by any means, go do it. But as I said, it hasn't stopped you. It hasn't stopped many people. And I think some people have the point of view that they're set back because they don't maybe have a background in marketing through university. But as you said, through failure, you often learn a lot and you can come out on top. So just getting stuck in as you done through your apprenticeship can really show that you don't really need that degree. You know, you can do the job. You've been doing the job. Yeah,
100%.
no, completely agree.
And it's that sort of, obviously I can turn around and say that, yes, I don't have the experience that a degree might give me, but I've had all these years of work experience where I've actually been sort of sat there in the trenches doing the work already. So I've gathered my experience that way by like doing the work rather than learning the theory. And obviously I know there's like internships and things that you do as part of the degree which get you that experience, but I don't necessarily think it gives you the full rounded view that actually like working within a company will do for you.
Yeah. No, completely agree. I can see here on the LinkedIn someone's commented in your favorite car.
Yeah, I know who it is. It's Josh.
Oh, it's Josh commenting about favorite car, but we'll get back to it anyway. So you're working at SEOTesting now as a marketing manager. What does your daily role look like? What would you do daily for SEOTesting, and what is SEOTesting, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, well, to answer the second question to start with, SEOTesting is an SEO tool where, so what we do is we take advantage of Google Search Console's API. So it means we're able to access all of the data that Search Console has. And with that, we can sort of play around with that to make it more accessible for you as like a marketer or a business owner or whatever. We've got like a ton of helpful reports in there where you can sort of click on, and the sort of roundabout ways that you don't need to then spend hours and hours exporting the data yourself. You don't have to spend that time doing it yourself and doing it manually, when you can just log into a tool and we can do it all for you in the background. But yeah, the day-to-day role is quite varied. With it being a marketing manager, this is like me moving away from specializing in SEO. So there's naturally, with it being SaaS, there's a lot of content work that needs to be done. That's where we find the sort of biggest gain. So there's a lot of content writing, but beyond that, there's like link acquisition that happens where I'm sort of commenting on press requests and all stuff like that. There's like review kind of stuff with me being in this sort of management role where I'm like maybe reviewing blog posts or videos. And then as part of like the wider sort of brand, there's me doing stuff like this, like webinars and appearing on podcasts and doing some sort of conference speaking. Like I've spoken at Brighton SEO and all that kind, and I'm doing that again in September. So it's pretty varied day to day. So yeah, no one day is really the same. Like there could be one day where I'm really sort of deep down focused, where I'll spend 6 to 8 hours just writing one blog post, or there could or there could be a day where I've got a million little tasks to do and I've got to try and fit that one little thing.
But I suppose that keeps you going, having a routine of doing the same thing can sometimes get a bit boring in some sense. So I suppose if you've got a million small tasks to do opposed to one big task, it really does break up the week for yourself.
Oh yeah, massively.
Yeah. And sorry, carry on. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. So I was just saying, it's kind of different than those sort of aspects. Is like if you're a sort of a content writer, then your whole day is writing content, which I don't think I necessarily enjoy. Whereas if you've got a more varied role, obviously there's like PPC stuff that we can look into. We've got plans to launch or relaunch the SEOTesting podcast that I'll be taking the lead on. So it keeps me interested because there's so much to do, or like so much for me to put my hand in and have like I can have like my hand in all these different facets of the business, which is really quite entertaining for me, and it gives me a more well-rounded view of the business rather than like being siloed in this one little thing or one little tactic or whatever.
Yeah, getting lost in a business structure can, well, for quite a lot of people we speak to, candidates wise, someone feel like a cog in the business, whereas when you have all these different aspects of business you're involved in, you actually feel like a person, not like you feel yourself opposed to just a cog in the whole system itself. But yeah, and just moving on, as I said, we're talking a lot about management at the moment, just for people listening and for ourselves. So you've got quite a lot of management experience. What would you say the best foundation for becoming a great leader in management? Because obviously you can manage, you can lead. What would you say foundational skills wise would be for someone maybe just starting a management job or someone maybe struggling? What would the foundation of becoming a great leader be?
Yeah, I think I've kind of got three little points to make on that, and they're all kind of along the same thing. Is first, you kind of need to understand what your communication style is, because with being a manager comes like more communication than being an individual contributor, and you probably might find that your day is like taken up with more meetings than it is like doing the work and being
hands-on,
acting as that kind of individual contributor. So you need to be aware of what your communication style is, and then beyond that you need to be sort of aware of what your team's communication style is. Obviously you might have people in your business that are more inclined, they'd rather write messages to you on Slack, or they might like to write this email, or some might like that more hands-on approach where it's like Zoom calls or in-person meetings, whatever your sort of company style is. And then obviously because of those two different things, you need to be able to adapt your communication style to suit. Obviously me speaking to some person in the business via email might not be the best way to get through to them, when I can just spend 10-15 minutes on a Zoom call and really make sure that they understand, and that's what's going to do. So there's like different little communication facets that we need to be aware of, and we need to adapt ourselves to suit, so we can be in the best position to help everyone else. That's like the whole thing of being a manager, or in my experience anyway, is like we need to be in the best position we can to help everyone else succeed rather than ourselves, because obviously when our team succeeds is when we succeed.
Couldn't have put it better myself or not. Yeah, I suppose it all starts with your communication style. And I'd say quite a lot of people struggle with the communication side of it, especially if you're just fresh in the managerial role and maybe communicating delegation of tasks, who to give the task to, for instance. But I completely agree. Communication is huge in every role, basically every point of life, but especially within management. And then another question: how did you know you were ready to become a manager and take that step up?
I think one of the biggest things that maybe like stood out to me was when I first started really realizing that I was kind of excited to answer questions in meetings. Like, so maybe like if earlier on in my career, I was sort of sit in the background, sort of as far away from the sort of action area of the meeting as possible. And I just sort of sit there and take notes and listen. Whereas as I sort of got a few more years into it, there'd be stuff that I'd be sort of taking a lead on within meetings, or doing little presentations here and there and all that kind of thing. So obviously being excited about answering questions, I mean, whether it's in meetings or not, like obviously if you find yourself in a position where people are coming to you for advice and help and that kind of thing, and you're able to help them, then that's another thing that you can take into account. And then I think as like it sort of developed was, I mean, I used to be quite process driven, where I'd
Okay.
like to be in control of everything, like have my little task list and just sit down and execute. Whereas I think now I'm a lot better at giving up certain elements of control. Like, so I'm not really as much of a control freak now, which is like the biggest thing, because it means I'm able to let other people do certain bits of work that previously would have been my remit. And that's like another big thing to look out for. And then obviously you've got sort of key traits that, whether you develop it over time or whether you were born with it or whatever, as like being interested in the success of others, as we've just spoken about, and being a problem solver, and all those kind of like good traits that you need to have, like being a good communicator and everything. So yeah, I think for me it was just kind of an amalgamation of that, like realizing I was taking the lead on more stuff anyway, or when I was happier to delegate certain work to different bits, then that was what kind of stood out to me. And I was like, okay, maybe I should look at now, like maybe trying to build a team out, or speak to my boss and seeing if we can develop sort of an actual sort of team dynamic within the business and that kind of thing.
Yeah, so it was more of a natural step for you, because quite a lot of people, maybe in a, say for instance, SEO exec role, they believe SEO manager is like the next step up in their career. But for yourself, you just sort of seen what your communication style was and what your strengths were, and like a management role would play to your strengths. So it was more natural movement for yourself.
Yeah, pretty much exactly that.
Yeah,
It's just kind of
yeah,
one of those things that evolved over time for me. And like, I think, I suppose, obviously it's in my title now, marketing manager, but like even before this particular role, there was stuff I was doing, like obviously like my previous role, like directly previous to this, I was managing an apprentice. And then obviously before that, there's been like stuff where I've like taken the lead on a like a project or something like that. So even if it's not in your title, you might find yourself being a manager in different bits anyway. And if you're enjoying that kind of thing, then maybe that's when you can make that decision as to start, okay, maybe I can start looking for different roles if that's what you need to do, or speaking to your boss and sort of trying to get that promotion and get that thing in your title that everyone craves.
yeah. And so you were saying there about managing apprentices, like freelancers, maybe outside agencies and stuff. Is there different like managerial techniques you would have to use depending on what sort of team is underneath you or how you're delegating your tasks? Or would you sort of have a core foundation of management which applies to all?
I think there's a core foundation that applies to all in a lot of sense, in the sense that you need to be able to relinquish control, and you need to be able to see other people succeed before yourself and everything like that. But I do think that you need to adapt your style depending on who you're managing. The biggest one is apprentices and non-apprentices, or apprentices and specialists, or whatever, because specialists, individual contributors that you're managing, that the key thing there is they already kind of have that good idea of what to do. So
Yeah.
you can kind of sit down with them and say, this is what needs to happen, and then they can kind of go away and do it. Whereas an apprentice is really fresh into the business. They might not know what even it is that you're trying to explain. They might not know what the process is to sort of sit down and do something. Like, you couldn't turn around to a new apprentice within a business and say, okay, go and distribute this piece of content that we've just written, because they might not know exactly what they need to do. Well, obviously you can have checklists and stuff in place, but there's a certain amount of hand holding that needs to happen, and there's a certain amount of like actually me sitting down and showing them, even if it's just like at the very start, like I'll need to show them like physically what to do, and then they can go away and do it. Whereas with sort of specialists and ICs and everything like that, then you can kind of just tell them and get on with it, and then you can kind of review it at the end and then make tweaks from there.
And I suppose, as you're saying, there's a fine line in between being a leader and then the micromanagement aspect. As you said, you do need to show people, especially apprentices, how it's done. And sometimes the way they may interpret something is like, oh, he doesn't believe in me. He's no confidence I can do this. But like realistically, what you're doing is just showing and illustrating the way it's done. And then sort of moving on to like the team overall, is there anything you would look for in a good team and a good SEO manager or marketing manager? Is there any standout things that would show it's what you want in a team?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of a team, obviously there's different nuances depending on the size of the business and that kind of thing.
Yeah,
But in terms of the actual sort of team itself, there needs to be that defined structure in place. So you need to know who's the manager, who's in control of different bits. Then you kind of need to have the sort of specialist that kind of sits underneath. And obviously, depending on the size of the business, you can have different specialists for different things. Like you can have a content writer and someone who's in charge of link building and one who's in charge of content distribution and all that kind of thing. Or you can have one person that's in charge of all of that. And then they obviously sit under the manager. And then obviously you can get into like the different facets underneath that, like interns and apprentices and everything. So you need to have that like actual team structure in place, and everyone needs to know what that structure is. And then beyond that, in terms of like making a good team, you need to be aligned on the purpose of the business or the purpose of the work that you're doing. You need to be aligned on the values of the business. So like us as an example, one of our core values is teach everything we know, and that like has an impact on the work that we're doing. So if we kind of, let's say, for example, like if I came to Nick, who's the founder, and said, I want to create this piece of content, we can kind of sit back and say, well, does it link back to any one of our core values that we have? And okay, it links back to sort of teaching everyone everything that we know. So we can kind of say, yes, all right, let's move that piece of content on. And then obviously you need to be aligned on behaviors as well. Like that's, I suppose that maybe sort of links more into HR stuff, but you need to know how to act and how to actually like do the job that you're there to do, and obviously work with other people within the business as well.
Perfect. Yeah. And just going back to the communication. So as we're both saying, the foundation of basically anything specifically a manager would be communication. Have you ever been in a situation where there's been miscommunication, maybe stakeholder, team member, and something's happened?
Yeah, I can think of a couple of examples. I think the big overriding one that sort of stands out to me was not being as communicative as I needed to be when there was a core update happening. And like I think all SEOs know the sort of peril involved in core updates. Obviously, you can look at your rankings along the lines of not making people aware that needed to be aware that this is what was going on. And I mean, my specific example was there was a core update the day I went on annual leave, and then I forgot to tell anyone that, because at that time, like I was the only marketer within the business, so it was like it was just me who's responsible for the sort of rankings and traffic and everything like that. And I sort of went on annual leave like the day after this core update dropped, and came back to what seemed like at the time like hundreds of emails as to like, oh, we're seeing the graph go down and no one knows why. And I'm like, and then I come back after the week and I'm like, oh yeah, it was a core update.
Forgot to say before.
Yeah, like I think the key thing there is like I forgot to make people who needed to be aware. Like the problem would have solved itself if I'd said like in handover notes, like, okay, by the way, this is like a last minute thing, but there's a core update that's just dropped. We might see rankings dip in the same way that we might see rankings take off a little bit. But if I'd have just like put that one little paragraph in the handover notes, then I wouldn't have had all those emails and I wouldn't have had 17 panic attacks when I came back to the office.
One panic attack for every email missed.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. That's what it felt anyway.
No, that's a perfect example of how beneficial communication is. Just a simple sentence could save everything, but it's easy done, especially if you have a bit of time off coming up and you're sort of in holiday mode the day before. You might take the time off and just completely forget about something like that. But yeah, it's understandable. And then just moving on, you've done a bit of public speaking before. Now, we done our first event, done a bit of public speaking ourselves. Would you like to talk a bit about that, where you've spoke and what you think about the whole networking side of, going to events and public speaking as a whole?
Yeah, well, I mean, my first public sort of speaking was, I think, Brighton SEO it was the first Brighton SEO after COVID. So I think it was around sort of September 2020. Yeah, September 2020, something like that. Speaking on how in-house SEOs specifically can grow their careers. So I did a whole talk on that. And then I moved on to like doing maybe some smaller events, like I did London SEO meetup, and then I've just not long spoken at Nottingham Digital Summit, which was an event run by Hallam, and then I'm doing Brighton SEO again this year. So I'm kind of, especially like more recently, there's been more public speaking engagements that I've been doing, whether it's like actual in-person conferences or like podcasts and webinars and stuff like that that I've appeared on, which I still class obviously under public speaking.
Well, it is, yeah.
But yeah, I think the benefit that comes from that is like less so the public speaking aspect and more the networking, like you said. Like the biggest things that have ever happened for me in my career have been down to the people that I've met at Brighton SEO, like really, or like networking on Twitter and that kind of thing. I suppose the key example is me getting this job at SEOTesting kind of organically happened through Twitter. It was like, yeah, pretty much. So it was me. Obviously, I'm quite active on Twitter and I like to put a lot of stuff out there. And then I got speaking to Nick, who's the founder, and then that led to doing freelance work for him on like a sort of one-time basis, which then led to another piece of freelance work and that kind of thing. Met him in person in Brighton last year, which is still the only time I've ever met him in person, which seems weird to say because he's my boss and everything, and he's the founder. I've only ever met him like in person through one event. But yeah, and then the job kind of came about. He asked me for some salary advice on a role they were sort of thinking of hiring for, and I sort of came back and I did a bit of research and I came back and said, yeah, it sounds something like this. Here's the sort of salary that I'd expect if it was me. And he just emails back like 6 hours later and he goes, cool. Would you be interested? Kind of like happened organically from there. But like beyond that, like some of the best people that I've like know and learned from in marketing have come from just speaking to them at conferences or like the conference parties and like having a pint with them, etc. But yeah, I mean, sort of in a roundabout way, linking back to public speaking is I don't necessarily think it's I don't think it's necessary at all to grow a good career. I don't think you have to go on stage and speak at all these conferences and everything like that to make a name for yourself. You can do that obviously through the work that you do and through sharing stuff online. I think it's more, for me, it was more like I was always shit scared of public speaking.
Yeah, same.
And then it was one of those things that I was like, okay, I'm just kind of I'll kind of push myself and I'll do it one time. And if I don't enjoy it, then it's fine.
And then, you've said you've done it then, I suppose, as well. It's like, right, I've tried it,
Yeah, exactly. You can say that you've done it and you can kind of tick it off. Got up on stage, really enjoyed it, had some good conversations afterwards, and yeah, it just kind of spiraled from there.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with the public speaking. As you said about shitting yourself, that's the best term to use for it. I would agree. I've only done it once, and that's the best way to describe what I felt beforehand. But yeah, the power of networking, especially through, I've only really been active in Twitter for a few months now. Everyone goes to LinkedIn. Yes, there is quite a few on Twitter, but I believe both of them are just as useful in their own ways. Just constantly, posting, commenting, liking, just reaching out to people, having a friendly conversation. You don't have to sell yourself. You just have to have that conversation, get to know them. As you said, you might bump into someone at Brighton SEO or one of the events you've spoke to prior, and then it could lead to freelancing work, which could lead on to a role.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I know you say like maybe you use LinkedIn more. I personally use Twitter a bit more, and that's like probably more down to just how I've used social media before working in marketing. Like Twitter was always my one, so it was just kind of organic for me to just sit there and like tweet things that I wanted to tweet out or comment on different people's photos and that kind of thing. And it's kind of all spiraled from there. I've not long crossed 3,000 odd followers, I think, and that's just through me tweeting shit about marketing and just genuinely getting to know people is like the biggest thing for me. Like I'm all about like that human connection. Like and obviously if like I always say to people on Twitter, I was like, if you ever see me at conferences, just come over and say hi and that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's quite a lot of people might get nervous and they might start a conversation off trying to sell them. Oh, what you do, this is what I do. How can we sort of collaborate? Just go over. Hi, how are you enjoying yourself?
Yeah.
Just have a conversation, be humanistic, as you said, have a human connection opposed to a sales pitch.
Yeah, 100%. That's like the biggest thing. Is like, just come up to me, tell me your name, and like, I know you from Twitter, or I saw you on this podcast, or whatever it is. Then
Yeah.
I'm always happy to talk to anybody. So.
Lovely, Ryan. Perfect. And just before we end the webinar, is there anything you want to bring up?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously the shameless plug part of this is, if you're interested in giving SEO testing a try, then just jump on the website. There's a 14-day free trial, no credit card needed, just name, email address, and give it a try for a couple of weeks. If you can find me on Twitter at Ryan Jones SEO, and yeah, just chat to me on there if you want.
Perfect, Ryan. We'll have that all linked in the post anyway. So if anyone's struggling to find it, just look at the post and click the link. But that's us, Ryan, for the SEO Career Mastery. It was lovely having you on. I'm sure we'll get you on again in the future just to see how your career's going.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime.
Perfect, Ryan. Thanks for coming on.
No problem at all.
All right. Cue awkward silence.